Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Graph in Kubernetes panel. This is a great chance to hear from a group of experts on the Kubernetes side as well as on the Graph side. See the sort of intersection between Graph and Kubernetes, two of our favorite trends if we're talking about data management. It can be difficult for some data and analytics professionals to really understand the differences between data implementation models. So to get them, like I said, sort of figured out and on the right track, that's why we got some wonderful folks today to join on this panel and share their knowledge. So just want to do a quick round of introductions first, and we can start with you, Feynman.
Okay, thank you for having me. It's so glad to be here. My name is Feynman Zhou. I come from Beijing, China, and now I'm currently working at Cloud, and I'm the community manager and CNCF ambassador. And we have developed an open source project based on Kubernetes, name is KubeSphere, and which has helped thousands of users to adopt Kubernetes in their production. And we help a lot of users to lower the learning curve of using Kubernetes. Yeah.
Very, very good. Solid intro. Next up, we have no stranger to our person who's no stranger to our community. Wei, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bart. So this is Wei Gu from Shanghai. Super excited to have this chance. I come from a team dedicated working on open source graph database named Nebula Graph, and we benefit from what Kubernetes offered to us. I'm personally a huge fan of Kubernetes, and I run K3S on my home lab. So I hope we can have a great talk today. Yeah.
Sure we will.
Thank
and
you.
Last but certainly not least, from Terminus DB, Chuck.
Hello. So so glad to be here. Yeah, it's very new to me. So KubeCon. Hello, folks. So I'm Chuck. I am based in London, UK. So Terminus DB is an open source graph database, and I can see that there's actually a lot of potential to be able to have graph database working with kind of Kubernetes kind of structure. I think it will work very well, but we'll go into it in a bit.
All right, sounds good. So the first question, just to get things moving, all right, we know the graph databases are the fastest growing data store in overall popularity. And we're taking that into the Kubernetes world, it can maybe get a little bit complex. So using graph on Kubernetes isn't necessarily as known perhaps as some other instances that we've seen in our community. Could you just give me a flavor of the sort of use cases that you're seeing out there and what that might tell us about the potential about, folks scaling knowledge graph with Kubernetes? Can we start with you, Wei?
Yeah, sure. So a graph database excels at many proven use cases that relies on data relationships with being write and read at scale. So one of them is the major one is the knowledge graph, and something like others like a recommendation system, a real-time intelligent risk control system, or in our data domain is like metadata management or data lineage, etc. So scaling graph data in distributed fashion introduce slight different challenges compared to more structured data scenarios like a tabular database. But our experience shows that a better approach is to shadow those different. So we actually expose our graph database in the operational wise surface. We expose them in a quite similar way to other non-graph databases. So in this way, the operation patterns and the distributed architecture actually quite fit to what Kubernetes already provide us. And I can see that more and more users are putting graph database on Kubernetes. And it's also worth to mention that our team is providing a managed graph database service at scale and is fully on Kubernetes. Yeah.
Very, very good. So lots of stuff going on there. Chuck, anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I think that the benefit of having a graph or with Kubernetes is that because it it's again like scaling issues, right? Like why people love using Kubernetes, like because it's so flexible, you can scale it very easily. And having a graph database, for example, what we have done in our infrastructure with our cloud service, Terminus X, is that we can actually scale up very easily with different processes. All we do is to just have, because you can separate the graph and the store is just like, right now we are using one store, so you can scale up very easily to like just have all the users access to the store. So I think, yeah, like I think because of the flexibility of how a graph database is structured, you can kind of customize it to the way that you really want. Like you can kind of have, you can have scalable, compute that you can have, and also like if you want, you can also scale the store as well. So I think that it was really I would say it's more flexible than most traditional databases. Yeah, and also with schema, you can governance the whole data coming in, and it will be really good for collaboration. And when you have use case that scales a lot, a lot of users and all this, so it will be great. Yeah.
Good. You mentioned some of the things about Kubernetes that people like, the flexibility. Feynman, if we're talking about graph databases, or even we can more broadly databases in general, what are some of the features do you think that Kubernetes has that is going to be allowing more and more folks to be running stateful workloads on Kubernetes?
Yeah, I could give a real case study for this question. As Wei has mentioned earlier, their company is providing the graph database as a service, which is all in Kubernetes, right? I would like to show. I would like to demonstrate a real use case that is Nebula Graph on KubeSphere. That is the interesting use case that I hear from the DevOps team from Wei's company, the company behind the Nebula Graph, ViewSoft. Yeah, as I know, ViewSoft is building their database as a service platform on Kubernetes with multi-cloud architecture. I remember the name is Nebula Cloud. Is right, Wei?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. The most important thing is that I find their DevOps team is also using KubeSphere as their Kubernetes platform, since they shared their case study in our in-person meetup. And this case also inspired me a lot. I would share their thoughts and their considerations when they adopt Kubernetes as the underlying infrastructure when building their database as a service. Before they build the database platform back to the beginning of 2021, they did a lot of investigation around running database on Kubernetes. For example, they are considering Kubernetes maturity, Kubernetes stateful capabilities, and high availability and performance characteristics of running databases in containers and Kubernetes. I remember there are some obvious advantages they have mentioned before. For example, the simplicity of deployment and having the whole stack management by the same orchestration tool, Kubernetes, auto-scaling and automatic reprovisioning of failed containers leading to high availability. So, for example, if one of the nodes running a database fails, Kubernetes will help to auto-scaling and self-healing, which help you to reschedule the workloads and pass to another nodes. When it talks to the benefits of running stateful workloads or databases on Kubernetes, I think the Kubernetes provides a operating pattern that defines custom resource definitions that are high-level objects, which typically interface the capabilities as simple YAML files, which allows you to deploy and manage your database workloads and the resources in a simple manner. As second part, I think Kubernetes also provides the capability to automate the day-to operations. For example, it provides deployment, high availability, backups, observability, patching, upgrading, and so on. All of these are out of box on Kubernetes. So operators can encode these operations into CRD. Yeah. And last but not least, I think the multi-cloud possibility is also the consideration that Microsoft DevOps team has mentioned before, since they are building their database as a service across AWS, Azure, and Alibaba Cloud Kubernetes services. Yeah.
Very, very good. Very comprehensive answer. A lot of depth there. I know that's good. That's good. That's good. To take this a little bit further, right? So we can all agree that you folks are believers when it comes to the running graph database on Kubernetes. But do you think that Kubernetes makes graph databases better? And if we consider the inverse, looking at it from the other direction, is graph the best technical deployment pattern that allows users to really get the most out of Kubernetes? We can start with you, Chuck. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think right now Kubernetes is basically the choice of for a lot of cloud applications. So because of what the benefit that we have just discussed about, I think that for graph database, if because of it works well with Kubernetes, I think it would be a very, very good, it would empower the graph database in that case to really make it, more powerful for a cloud service, for a cloud application. So yeah, if of course you can run graph database locally or run it in just a single container and stuff. But with Kubernetes, I think it really opened up a lot of possibilities and really make it modernized to the modern standard, the golden standard of the industry of cloud services. So I think that's the good thing about it.
All right. Wei, anything that you'd like to add on that?
Yep. Regarding the Kubernetes make graph better, I think my answer is yes, and it applies in many cases and angles. But one of the most angle that I think is even more true is in the case of the hyperscale graph or high concurrency graph traffic scenarios. And in those scenarios, that they will demand the state to be distributed by nature. And in this case, Kubernetes uncovered the full potential of a distributed graph database, where we have the auto ops decouples the ops expertise on scaling, failover, and tuning, and the tooling brought by Kubernetes ecosystem out of box is come to enable our even more modern in the ops, like we can leverage the infrastructure as a code and the GitOps together with other application layers. So in this year, so most of the application and other data stack, data infra, in most cases, they are already running on Kubernetes too. And those the final one is those concepts and factors being managed and operated in a distributed database. In their DNA, it's actually simplified if we manipulate every states and meta states from the abstraction brought by Kubernetes. In fact, if we manage those kind of systems, the distributed system is complicated. If we manage them barely on the operating system itself, we can run it from the binary package, but it's even more complicated. So through the abstraction from the Kubernetes, it's easier to me. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Feynman, anything you want to add there?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not an expert for graph database domain, but I can give some thoughts around the Kubernetes and running stateful workloads on Kubernetes. As apart from the most important part, the Kubernetes operator pattern, and it provides the deployment, high availability, backups, and monitoring. All of the capabilities are provided by the Kubernetes operator, and we know we have some installation methods to quickly set up the workloads and resources for the stateful workloads, such as Helm charts or customize. I think the most important thing is that the design pattern of Kubernetes is that provided a unified layer and a standardized API for any kinds of workloads. As you know, the stateful sets had been involved to GA around 3 years ago, and plus the cloud native storage such as OpenEBS and something like that. It also helps you to easily manage your graph database on Kubernetes. Yeah.
Good. I think it's very clear that we're generating a strong amount of interest in taking this topic further. So if people want to learn more about graph databases, getting them on Kubernetes, Chuck, what are some of the best resources, the place where they should go to meet folks such as yourselves, but to get better informed about this, so it's more comfortable for them when they're making the next steps?
Yeah, so well, I can only give advice on, like, for example, if people are interested in Terminus DB, we do have resources that people can go to have a look to see if that works for them. I think the best way is to join our Discord channel, to chat to the team. We have our DevOps superstar Robin in the team that is happy to answer your questions if you want to see whether Terminus DB will work in my infrastructure and things like that. Also, there's a lot of teaching resources on our website as well that you could see whether the team can, it will work for your use case, whether graph database would be the choice of your project. So yeah, I think so. Check it out. That's all I can tell at this point. Yeah.
With that in mind, though, I guess learning, every database is kind of its own world, though, right? Are there things that people need to keep in mind specifically when it comes to graph databases?
Yeah, I think the specific thing is that whether you need a graph database, right? A lot of times, I know folks are very passionate about, the newest and the shiniest tools and, the new technology. But I think for me is that look at your use case. If you have a kind of relatively confined and small use case that is already working well with a relational database, then maybe you don't need it. But a lot of times we have seen folks who really dedicated time and effort to work with us, is that because their use case really need the huge and flexibility and complexity of a graph database. So I think that in the long run, I would really wish you could make the decision before you invest. Of course, learning is good. Like we all love learning new technology, but I think when you go hands-on and really try migrating your data, you have to think about this kind of decision before you really engage and invest in it. So yeah.
Good stuff. Wei, what would you recommend if folks want to get more into graph databases and Kubernetes?
I think
sorry.
That's okay, don't worry.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think similar to Chuck, you can also check the Nebula graph on to our GitHub, Slack, and our Discord forum, and we have some documentation and hands-on toy projects to help you understand more of what graph can provide in a database perspective. And on the Kubernetes perspective, we have a playground you can check and how it can help you automate everything. And also you can check out our Kubernetes operators of the Nebula graph itself on GitHub. So you can learn some patterns and the limitation and what it can be done with Kubernetes plus the graph database. Yeah.
All right, good. Feynman, last but not least.
Actually, before you migrating all of your workloads, especially for the stateful workloads to Kubernetes, I think you have to considering if you are an expert or operator for Kubernetes. So actually, we also provide a series of Kubernetes learning resources for users, especially for the newbies. So if you want to learn more, especially for the practice of Kubernetes, for example, provisioning a new Kubernetes cluster, we have some tools like that. I'm not sure if you have ever heard about it. Kubesphere provides a cluster management and provisioning tool, which name is KubeKey, which helps you to provision an all-in-one Kubernetes cluster with all of those add-ons you want. Yeah, so if you want to dip a little bit more into Kubernetes, we also have a video tutorial on our website, so you can check out and to see what's going on there.
All right, good. So I think this is very clear. There's lots of stuff to learn, lots of places to do it, and lots of really helpful people to make this transition easier. Thank you all very much for joining us today. We got a lot in a short period of time. This is clearly a subject we will be taking further as we've seen as well too with the talks we've had with Wei and also with Luke from Terminus, and always wonderful to have you, Feynman, as someone who's very, very active in the Kubernetes ecosystem. So thank you all for being with us today. And now I will jump back to our studio in Valencia to continue the event. All right, take care, everybody.